I never thought I'd beg my own flesh and blood for a corner to crash in. But there I was, suitcase in hand, standing on the manicured lawn of Ethan's McMansion in suburban Chicago. The autumn wind whipping my coat like it was trying to slap some sense into me. Bankruptcy had stripped me bare, 40 years of nursing shifts, mortgage payments, and scraping by in that godforsaken double-wide trailer in Gary. All gone in a flash of bad investments and a crooked accountant who turned out to be Ethan's college buddy. I'd raised him alone after his dad bailed when he was 5. Poured every dime into his Ivy League dreams. And now, he was the tech whiz pulling 7 figures at some Silicon Valley knockoff in the Windy City, while I was just another statistic in the American Dreams obituary column. But family's family, right? Or so I told myself as I rang the bell, expecting a hug, maybe a beer,
And a mom.
stay as long as you need. What I got was a lease agreement slid under the door, like junk mail. Typed up on his fancy letterhead, $250,000 annual rent for the basement suite. Prorated monthly. Utilities extra. No pets. No guests without prior approval. 250 fucking thousand. For the moldy crawl space he'd turned into a man cave back when he was a pimply teen blasting Call of Duty till dawn. My hands shook so bad, I dropped my phone, cracking the screen fitting, since that's exactly what he'd just done to my heart. I should have walked away right then, hitched a ride to the nearest shelter. But pride's a bitch. And desperation's her ugly sister. Ethan opened the door finally, all 6'2" of him in a crisp button-down and chinos, looking every bit the golden boy I'd molded him into. "Mom," he said, voice smooth as the bourbon he probably sipped neat now. "This is business. You taught me that boundaries keep things clean. Business." From the kid who'd cried into my shoulder when his goldfish died. Who I'd lied to the principal for when he cheated on that algebra test. I signed the paper with a pen that felt like a shank, because what choice did I have? The bank owned my trailer. My car was repossessed. And Social Security wouldn't kick in for another decade. So I hauled my life down those creaky stairs, into the damp underworld of his empire, and whispered to the shadows that this wasn't over. That first night in the basement, I lay on the lumpy futon Ethan had graciously left behind, staring at the water-stained ceiling while the muffled thump of his EDM playlist vibrated through the floorboards. The air smelled like mildew and regret, thick enough to choke on. I'd always prided myself on being the strong one, Amelia Hargrove. Aren't. The woman who'd stitched up gangbangers in the ER without flinching. Who'd buried her miscarriages with a bottle of cheap Merlot and a stiff upper lip. But this was a gut punch from the universe. Delivered by the hand of the boy I'd die for. $250,000. The number looped in my head like a bad infomercial. That's what he valued me at, a liability, not a lifeline. I'd checked the fine print before signing. Eviction clause after 30 days if payments lagged. No extensions for familial hardship. He'd even notarized it himself. The smug bastard. Probably to make it ironclad in some DuPage County courtroom. Morning came too soon. Gray light filtering through the lone basement window like dirty dishwater. I dragged myself upstairs for coffee. My slippers whispering against the Berber carpet that probably cost more than my old trailer. Ethan was at the kitchen island, scrolling his phone. A kale smoothie glowing green in a blender that could double as a spaceship. "Sleep okay?" he asked without looking up. Like we were roommates on a sitcom. Not mother and son in freefall. I forced a nod, pouring Folgers into a mug that said, "World's okayest boss," a gag gift I'd given him years ago. "Rent's due the 1st.
Mom.
Venmo works."
Just like that.
casual as ordering takeout. I wanted to hurl the mug at his head, watch the ceramic shatter, like my illusions, but I swallowed it down with black coffee bitter as bile. We didn't talk about the why of it all. Not then. Not the bankruptcy that hit like a freight train last spring, wiping out my savings overnight. I trusted that accountant, Mark Riley, Ethan's frat brother from Northwestern, to handle my nest egg after I sold the trailer lot for a song. Low-risk index funds, he'd promised. All ivy polish and firm handshakes. Turned out, he'd funneled it into some Ponzi scheme cooked up in Ethan's startup circle. High-yield crypto bullshit that evaporated when the market tanked. I confronted Mark in his Loop office, tears streaming as I begged for scraps. But he just shrugged. Bad luck. Amelia. Sign here for the Chapter 7. Bad luck. That's what they call it when your kid's ambition chews you up and spits you out. Ethan knew, hell. He'd vouched for Mark. Introduced us at that holiday party where champagne flowed, and I felt like an imposter in my thrift store dress. But he never apologized. Never offered to front the cash. Instead, a gilded cage in his basement, rent like a middle finger to the woman who'd starved herself to fund his tuition. Days blurred into a routine of humiliation. I'd sneak upstairs for meals, picking at his DoorDash leftovers while he FaceTimed investors from the sunroom, his voice booming about disruptive fintech solutions. He'd glance my way sometimes. A flicker of something, guilt, pity, but it vanished quick as a Chicago summer storm. I started job hunting on the public library Wi-Fi, applying for cashier gigs and home health aide positions that paid peanuts. Experience preferred, the ad sneered, as if 40 years in scrubs didn't count for shit now. Nights, I'd pace the basement, fists clenched, replaying every sacrifice, the overtime shifts that left me hollow-eyed, the boyfriends I ditched because Ethan comes first, the dreams of traveling Route 66 that I traded for PTA meetings and soccer sidelines. And for what? A son who saw me as a squatter in his success story. It was on the 10th day that the first crack appeared, not in the foundation, but in the facade. I was rooting through the basement storage for an old photo album, something to remind myself we'd been real once, when my fingers brushed a locked metal box tucked behind the water heater. Curiosity's a devil, especially when you're broke and broken. I jimmied it open with a screwdriver from Ethan's forgotten toolbox, heart hammering like I was back in the ER triaging a code blue. Inside, a thumb drive, yellowed legal docs, and a stack of Polaroids that hit me like smelling salts. The top photo showed Ethan, maybe 25, grinning beside Mark in a dive bar, arms around two girls half their age, bottles of Patron glinting. Harmless frat boy nostalgia, until I plugged in the drive on my ancient laptop. Files upon files, emails, wire transfers, spreadsheets labeled Hargrove Diversion. My name. Everywhere, my social security number. My bank routing. Forged signatures on investment consents I'd never seen.
And they're
buried in a thread from 3 years back, Ethan to Mark. She's clueless. Perfect cover. Routed through her accounts. Low profile. If it blows, she takes the heat. Mom's got no paper trail. Just nurse pay stubs. We walk. My vision tunneled, the screen blurring as bile rose. He hadn't just known, he'd orchestrated it. The Ponzi wasn't bad luck, it was a lifeline he'd thrown me under the bus for. Laundering dirty startup money through my modest portfolio to dodge IRS scrutiny. I'd signed off on nothing, but there I was, the patsy, the fall guy in his climb to corner office glory. The betrayal wasn't deep, it was abyssal. a chasm swallowing 40 years of love whole. I confronted him that night, bursting into the living room where he lounged with Netflix and a scotch. The docs clutched like a rosary. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" My voice cracked, but I held his gaze, demanding the truth he owed me. He didn't flinch, just set down his glass, slow and deliberate, like I was a client pitching a dud idea. "Mom, you're out of your depth. That was business. Survival. The market's a shark tank. You don't get eaten. You eat. Survival." For him, maybe. For me, it was ruin, nights sobbing in the trailer, auctioning off heirlooms, the shame of welfare lines. He leaned forward, eyes cold as Lake Michigan in January. "You want out? Pay the rent or pack. But digging into my shit? That's trespassing. I could have you arrested." Arrested. By my own son. The room spun, and I fled back to the basement, slamming the door on his laughter, sharp, triumphant, the sound of a king defending his throne. But in the dark, something shifted. Rage isn't just fire, it's alchemy, turning victims into venom. I wouldn't go quietly. Not anymore. As I huddled on that futon, the water heater humming like a conspirator, I remembered a story from my ER days, a patient raving about neural echoes, some black market neurotech scam peddled in Chicago's underbelly. Experimental implants that promise memory wipes but delivered. Glitches. Body glitches. I dismissed it as meth-fueled delusion then.
But now,
desperation breeds believers. By dawn, I was online, chasing whispers on dark web forums, my fingers flying over keys slick with sweat. If Ethan wanted a monster in his house, I'd become one. Not with fists or lawsuits, I was too broke for that, but with something sharper, revenge, twisted and total, starting with the impossible. The forums were a rabbit hole of regret, anonymous threads lit by the glow of desperation, Neuralink knockoffs gone wrong, woke up in my dog's head, FML, or Chicago Chop Shops, $5,000 for a MindSwap trial. No refunds. I bookmarked a contact, Dr. Lena Voss, ex-MIT dropout turned ghost in the machine, operating out of a derelict warehouse in Pilsen. Her pitch, EchoSync, bridge the gap between minds. Corporate espionage. Personal vendettas. Identity theft. You wear the crown. They wear the fall. It sounded like sci-fi snake oil. But the testimonials, grainy vids of users blinking in unfamiliar mirrors, mouthing it worked, hooked me. $3,000 upfront. Wired to an offshore account. I pawned my engagement ring, the one fake-ass bastard of an ex left behind, and cleaned out my last food stamps. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy hosting networking brunches upstairs, schmoozing venture capitalists, while I starved in the shadows. Meeting Voss was straight out of a noir flick, rain-slicked alleys, the L rumbling overhead like thunder gods arguing. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s with a buzz cut and tattoos snaking up her arms like circuit boards, waiting in a gutted factory that smelled of ozone and old solder. "Amelia Hargrove," she said, not a question. Her voice a low hum over the whir of cooling fans. Seeking the swap. Target. I slid a photo of Ethan across the scarred workbench, him at his desk, smug in victory. She arched a brow. Son?
kinky.
But viable. EchoSync's beta, neural lace injection, quantum entanglement bullshit. You sync. You slip, 30 minutes in their skull. Full sensory hijack. Pilot it right. Plant suggestions. Extract secrets. Abuse it? Brains fry like eggs on a griddle. Risks psychosis. Permanent dissociation. Death by overload. I signed the waiver on a stained napkin. No lawyer. No second thoughts. When? Tonight. Full moon amps the waves, less interference. She prepped me in a corner rig for a drip of some glowing serum. Electrodes kissing my temples like lovers' bites. As the world fuzzied, Voss leaned in, breath minty with synthetic calm. Visualize the bridge. Cross it angry. I did, Ethan's face morphing into a mask. My fury the hammer cracking it. Then blackout. A void deeper than debt. And surge, I was falling, tumbling through veins of light, landing hard in unfamiliar skin. Eyes snapped open, not mine. Ethan's. I was upstairs, in his king bed. Sheets tangled around legs too long, too lean. The mirror across the room showed his reflection, stubbled jaw, blue eyes wide with my panic. Holy shit, I whispered, but it came out his baritone, smooth and commanding. My hands, his hands flexed, tracing the unfamiliar ridges of abs honed by Peloton and privilege. Heart pounding, I stumbled to the ensuite, splashing water that felt alien on this face. It worked. Voss's toy had flung me across the threshold, puppeteering my son's body while mine. Where? Downstairs. I guessed. Ethan trapped in my husk, waking to the futon sag and the rent ledger's weight. Elation hit first, sharp as smelling salts, a god's rush, wielding his power like a loaded gun. I rifled his nightstand, passport, burner phone, a Glock 19 tucked under socks. The phone buzzed, texts from Investors LLC, codes for laundered funds. Secrets spilled like cheap wine. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, numbered at 8 figures, emails plotting a hostile takeover of his own firm. Backstabbing the CEO who'd mentored him. The betrayal deepened. Ethan wasn't just a fraud. He was a serpent, shedding skins of loyalty for scales of gold. I laughed, a bark that echoed off marble tiles, tasting vengeance sweet on his tongue. But the clock ticked, 30 minutes max. Voss warned. I dressed in his walk-in closet, Armani's suit hugging like a second skin, and descended the stairs, each step a conquest. There I was, in the basement doorway, my body, disheveled and dazed, Ethan blinking out from behind my eyes. Confusion warped my features, his confusion, puppeteered by alien strings. What the fuck, he rasped, my voice cracking like it hadn't since puberty. I, in his shell, smiled, slow and serpentine. Morning.
Mom.
Sleep well. The irony was delicious. A twist of the knife I'd been handed. He lunged, clumsy in my frame, but I sidestepped easy, his athleticism a cheat code. You bitch, how? I grabbed my wrist, twisting just enough to pin. Echo sync. Baby. Your dirty little secrets got company now. Interrogation was intimate, brutal in its poetry, me force-feeding him truths from his own files, his face crumpling in my wrinkles. The Ponzi? His brainchild. Mark the mule. Me the shield, framed with Dr. Docs to absorb the audit heat while he cashed out. You were disposable, he sneered through my lips. Defiance flaring. Nurse mom. No connections, perfect patsy. Rage boiled. But I reined it. Time was bleeding. I whispered commands. Neural nudges Voss prepped me for. Confess. Tomorrow. To the board. Full exposure. His eyes, my eyes, widened, a glitch rippling as the swap tugged. No, wait, then snap. The bridge collapsed, and I tumbled back to my body, gasping on the futon as Ethan fled upstairs, slamming doors like a child caught stealing cookies. He avoided me for days after, holing up in his office, barking into headsets about personal matters. I watched from the basement window, a voyeur in my own home, plotting the next crossing. Voss upgraded the lace, repeat sessions, longer holds, for a price I paid in pilfered watches from his drawer. Each swap was a heist, me and Ethan's skin, siphoning data, planting doubt. I leaked anon tips to his competitors, fintech rivals salivating for insider dirt, emails forwarded from his accounts. Time to erode his empire. Controversial? Hell yes. Was I stealing his life? Or reclaiming mine? The line blurred. Ethics dissolving in the acid of payback.
Nights. Post-swap.
I'd lie awake. Echoes lingering, his cologne on my pillow, phantom strength in my limbs. Was I becoming him? Or was he me? Unraveling in mirrors that lied? The tension coiled. A spring under pressure. Ethan grew paranoid, changed locks on his study, installed cameras I dodge in his body, like a ghost in a machine. Brunch invites dried up, he ate alone, eyes darting like a cornered rat. I pushed harder, swaps bleeding into hours. Once, I attended his Zoom board meeting, voice modulated low, greenlighting a deal that'd tank his stock when the SEC sniffed it. Bold move. Ethan, the suits praised, oblivious. Power was aphrodisiac, dark and heady me, puppeteering his ascent into freefall. But cracks showed, headaches like migraines from hell, Voss warning of echo bleed, personalities seeping. I'd catch myself humming his playlists, craving kale over corned beef hash.
And Ethan?
He cornered me one swap-free night, my body frail against his tower. This ends.
Mom.
I know your game, neural shit. I'll bury you deeper than bankruptcy. Threat laced with fear. The boy peeking through the mogul. I smiled, teeth bared. Try it, son. But remember, I birthed you. I can unmake you. Climax brewed in whispers, a gala. His firm's big bash at the Art Institute. Schmoozers in tuxes toasting disruption. I'd swap in. Full infiltration. Spike his speech with confessions. Watch the dominoes crash. But as prep night fell, Voss called. Voice edged. Final tweak. Permanent bridge option. One-way ticket. You in his head forever. Temptation nod. A serpent's apple. End him utterly. Live his life as mine reborn? Or pull back? Let justice limp? The decision loomed. Controversial as original sin. Destroy the monster I made. Or become it. The gala night hit Chicago like a velvet hammer, limos clogging Michigan Avenue. The Art Institute's lions guarding doors flung wide to the elite. I'd prepped in stolen moments, Ethan's tux tailored to my curves and memory. His speech cards laced with my venom, lines about ethical shortcuts and familial debts unpaid, veiled enough for deniability, sharp enough to bleed. Voss's rig hummed in a rented van 2 blocks away, her face pale under sodium lamps as she juiced the serum. Permanence irreversible. Amelia. You'll wake as him, or not at all. Her eyes held ghosts. Swap's gone south. I nodded, veins itching for the plunge. Do it. He dies tonight. One way or another. No more half measures. This was scorched earth. American style. Burn the village to salt the fields. Injection burned like hellfire. Neurons firing in revolt. But then the rush, seamless. A silk slide into Ethan's cortex. I blinked into the mirror of his green room backstage. His reflection smirking with my malice. Flawless sync, no lag. No bleed. Just power. Pure and profane. The crowd murmured beyond the curtain. Crystal clinking like ice in a whiskey neat. Power players from Sand Hill Road rubbing elbows with Chicago old money. I stepped out. Ethan's stride confident. Handshakes firm as I wove through the throng, smiling at the senator's wife. Nodding to the VC who'd bankrolled his rise. Ethan, you devil, heard you're revolutionizing remittances. One suit boomed, clapping his shoulder. I chuckled low, the sound rumbling true. All in a day's betrayal, I quipped, and they laughed, mistaking edge for wit. Spotlights hit as I took the podium. The room a sea of upturned faces. Expectant. My heart, his heart, thudded steady. Adrenaline, a drug I'd chase forever. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. Voice amplified. Resonant. Tonight we celebrate disruption. But let's talk real innovation. The kind that builds on lies. Wanders through the innocent. Murmurs rippled. Polite confusion. I leaned in, eyes locking on Mark Riley in the front row. His face paling like bad milk. Take my mother, for instance. Hardworking nurse. Backbone of this city's underbelly. I used her, funneled dirty funds through her accounts, let her tank when the feds came knocking. Bankruptcy? My design. Family? Collateral. Gasps now. Sharp as shattering glass. Mark bolted. But security, tipped by my pre-swap and on-call, swarmed him at the exit. Cuffs glinting under chandeliers. Chaos erupted. Beautiful and biblical shouts. Phones whipping out for viral gold. Ethan's partners scattering like roaches. I kept going. Words pouring like purge, details from the drive. Account numbers. The Polaroids projected behind me via a hacked feed, Voss's parting gift. This isn't just business, it's butchery. I've eaten my own to climb.
And tonight.
I choke on it. The crowd fractured, some applauding the confession stunt, others dialing lawyers. The senator's wife fainting into caviar. I stepped down amid the maelstrom, tasting triumph bitter as bile. When Ethan's phone buzzed in my pocket, Voss.
Abort.
Signals fracturing, his mind's fighting back. Get out. Too late. The bridge buckled. A seismic wrench. And I felt him, Ethan, surging up. A tidal wave of rage crashing my control. Limbs jerked. Puppet strings snapping. I staggered into a waiter. Champagne flutes exploding like fireworks. Voices overlapped in my skull. My pleas. His snarls. Get out of my head. You hag. A cacophony of selves at war. The room spun. Faces blurring into a carousel of judgment. And I collapsed. Ethan's body convulsing on Persian rugs. Froth at lips as neural storm raged. Paramedics swarmed, irony's cruel jest. Me dying in scrubs I'd worn for decades, and as darkness clawed. A whisper. You did this.
Mom.
For what? I woke in Northwestern Memorial. Tubes snaking my arms. Monitors beeping a dirge. Not my arms, still his. Pale and veined with 4 bruises. Permanent.
All right.
Voss's van found torched in an alley. Her body unidentified in the morgue. Ethan's doing? Pre-swap sabotage? The news cycled on loop. Fintech mogul's shocking meltdown. Confesses to fraud in viral rant. His empire crumbled overnight. SEC raids. board resignations. Mark singing like a canary for immunity. I'd won. In a way, vengeance viral. His throne ash. But victory's Pyrrhic when you're trapped in the enemy's cage. Discharge was a farce, me. In Ethan's frame. Signing out as Ethan Hargrove, the nurses cooing sympathy for your breakdown. Hun, back to the McMansion. Now a crime scene taped off. I slipped in through a side door. Ghosts of gala glitter crunching underfoot. The basement waited. My old life a relic, futon sagging. Lease mocking from the fridge. I descended, body too tall for the low beams, and curled on that bed, his scent, cologne and cologne cloying. Mirrors lied everywhere. I avoided them, but echoes persisted, his habits creeping, my fury fading into fatigue.
Who was I now?
Amelia, the Avenger, or Ethan 2.0, remade in her image, weeks ground by an isolation. The house a tomb. Reporters camped the lawn, speculating tech-induced psychosis, while lawyers circled like vultures. I managed his emails in bursts, liquidating assets to pay my debts, ironically settling the bankruptcy Voss's swap had buried. Controversial calls piled. Donate to fraud victims? Sue the firm for wrongful termination? Each decision a referendum on morality, forgive and rebuild. Or hoard and harden. I chose gray. Wiring restitution anonymously, then torching the Cayman's keys. Power lingered. Seductive, his Rolodex a skeleton key to doors I'd never knocked. But the bleed worsened, nights dreaming his conquests, mornings waking with his appetites. My memories fraying like old film. Then the twist, a knock. Not reporters, but feds. Suits with badges. Faces granite. Mr. Hargrove, we need to talk about your mother. His blood iced. They'd exhumed the files. Deeper than I dug, not just Ponzi, but roots rotten to the core. Ethan's father, my ex, long gone, hadn't bailed. I'd framed him. 20 years back. Our shift gone wrong. A patient OD'd on meds I'd palmed for cash. A desperate grab to fund Ethan's braces and braces. The tox screen pinned it on the dad. Drunk driver cover I'd spun to protect my boy. He rotted in prison. Died inside. While I played martyr mom. Secret buried. A crime mine. The mistake I'd gunned for Ethan. Now boomeranging in spades. The agents laid it out cold. Ethan knew. Had always known. Hacked my old emails as a teen. Pieced the puzzle. Then mirrored it, his fraud my echo. Revenge generational. He set you up to fall like you set his father, the lead said. Pity in his eyes. Cycle of it. But you confessed for both. Truth reversed. I wasn't victim, I was architect. My betrayal birthing his. The room tilted. His body heaving as sobs racked, my sobs. In his throat. They cuffed me gentle. Reading Miranda like a eulogy. The basement stairs my last free steps. Jail was a different beast, Cook County. The beast that chewed souls and spat husks. Me and Ethan's skin. Processed as him. Mugshot flashing those blue eyes wide with my terror. Fingerprints mapping his whirls over my prints. White collar they classified, bunking me in a low SEC pod with embezzlers and insider traders. Men who eyed the new fish with wolfish calculus. I kept head down. Voice pitched low to match his timbre. But inside, Amelia screamed, clawing at walls that weren't mine. The swaps had fused us, memories bleeding. His arrogance seeping into my resolve. My guilt corroding his swagger. Court dates loomed. Dual indictments. Ethan Hargrove for fraud. Amelia for the old manslaughter cover. Irony's noose, tightening with each arraignment. Public devoured it, the Hargrove horror, tabloid screaming, mother-son mindfuck. Who's the real monster? Pundits on Fox and MSNBC duked it out. Was I vigilante justice or psychotic break? Toxic motherhood in the gig economy. One op-ed wailed, another hailed, working-class reckoning against elite greed. Debates raged in comment sections. Families fracturing over dinner tables. Forgive the son who weaponized blood, or the mom who started the war. I watched from the pod's communal TV. His face, my face, plastered nationwide. A cautionary meme. Voss's tech leaked postmortem. Black market bans incoming. But too late for us. EchoSync's ghost-haunted hearings. Experts testifying to neural possession. Juries torn between sci-fi and sin. Ethan's lawyers, mine now, pushed insanity, painting me as fractured prodigy undone by pressure. But I fired them mid-depo. Voice steady in his drawl. No deals. Full truth. Controversial to the core. Plead out for time served. Or burn it all exposing the rot. I chose fire. Testifying in my own his voice. Unraveling the tapestry. My crime birthing his. Swap as karmic blade. The courtroom gasped as I detailed the gala. The bridge. The man I'd become. I asked him to stay after I fell. I said, eyes on the prosecutor. A woman with my mom's steel. He charged rent on my ruin. So I rented his soul. Jurors shifted. Some nodding empathy. Others recoiling horror, debatable justice. Vigilante or villain. Sentencing day dawned gray. Chicago's sky weeping sleet on the courthouse steps. The judge. A grizzled vet with liver spots like mine. Eyed me long. Mr. Hargrove or MS. Hargrove, you've woven a web of woe. Generational and grotesque.
20 years.
Concurrent, fraud, and conspiracy. But mercy in the method. Your confessions cleared a dozen victims.
Mercy.
A word tasting like ash. As cuffs clicked, I caught my reflection in the gallery glass. Ethan's youth masking my weariness. A hybrid horror. Reporters surged. Mics thrusting like spears. Regrets? One yelled. I paused, his lips curving my smile. Only that I didn't swap sooner. Prison life settled. A rhythm of regret. Yard time pacing his long legs. Mess hall trading stories with cons who saw the tech guy, not the nurse beneath. The lead evolved, nights scripting code in dreams. Days yearning for ER chaos over cell block tedium. Letters trickled, from old colleagues, forgiving my disappearance, from Ethan's exes, spilling how he'd charmed and chewed them too. One. A pink envelope from a half-sister I'd forgotten, Dad's love child. Reaching out post-scandal. You paid for us all. Aunt Ames. Ethan's ghost haunts. But you broke the chain.
Chain.
Maybe. Or forged a new one. Me carrying his sentence in my skin. A perpetual swap. Twists lingered in appeals. DNA quirks proving the fusion. Ethicists petitioning, release the anomaly. But I waved them off. Content in confinement's clarity. Vengeance? Sated. But sour, his empire dust. My secrets aired. Yet the boy I loved peeked through bars. Whispering sorry. Mom in hypnagogic haze. Endings debatable, justice served. Or just delayed. Did I unmake the monster? Or multiply it? High noon or midnight? Depending on your light. Years blurred. Gray on gray. Until parole board loomed. Early release for rehabilitation. I stood before them in Ethan's suit. Recycled from evidence lockers. voice a blend, his polish, my grit. I'm Amelia Hargrove, I declared, remade and repentant. Let me out to live what's left. They deliberated, faces masks, then nodded, free. With strings, therapy, monitoring, no tech touch. Walking out those gates, Chicago's wind whipping free. I hailed a cab to the old trailer lot, now a weed-choked memory. No McMansion, no basement, just horizon, endless as regret. I settled in a Gary walk-up, nursing shifts again, irony's encore, stitching wounds while mine scarred over. Ethan's face aged in mirrors, lines creeping my laugh, but eyes, mine, fierce and faded. The cycle broke, or bent, who's to say? Readers will argue till doomsday, hero or horror. All I know is this: betrayal's a boomerang, secret serpents, revenge a mirror cracking both ways. I asked my son to stay, he charged the price. I paid it in full, and woke owing nothing but the truth.